Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Recently, I've been studying the book of Daniel in the hopes of preaching on that sometime soon. As I've been doing that, though, I've been reminded of how the role of government and our relationship to it plays a big role in that book. So I thought I'd take some weeks to look at what the Bible has to say about government and our relationship to it. So, along those lines, let me read from Romans 13 1 through 7, and I'll be reading from the ESV translation. I first preached this sermon about 20 years ago, and I used the NIV, so the verses will sound a little different at times in the sermon. But reading in Romans 13 1 to 7, let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. Well, let's pray together before we look at this. Lord, we thank you that you have created all things. You've created government for our good. And Lord, show us how that's the case and how we are to relate to it. Bless this time, I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. A number of years ago, a late night comedian was complaining that the cost of living had gotten so high that your average American could no longer afford to buy his own congressman. This kind of reflects the cynical, if sadly sometimes accurate view that we have of our politicians today. However, as originally designed as God intends it, government is a very good thing. It's something God's blessed us with as his servant to do us good and to protect us from harm, to promote law and order so that we can live in peace and harmony. Proper government helps us to live more peaceful and fruitful lives. That's Paul's first point. Government is a good thing and not a bad thing in and of itself, because it's been established by God himself. He says in verse 1, there is no governing authority except that which God has established. And the governing authorities that exist have been established by God. In verse 2, government is also referred to as what God has instituted. Since God has instituted government, it's worthy of our obedience and respect. Also, 3 times in this passage, government is referred to as God's servant. And that implies 3 things. First of all, that government is not God, nor is it our final authority in life. But government itself is under God and answerable to him. Governments and governors, as God's servants, are accountable to God. Secondly, as God's servants, they're supposed to serve God in the public good and not just benefit and enrich themselves or their friends. Thirdly, since governments are God's servants, they have a very real role to play in contributing to our well-being. And what is God's purpose for government as his servant? Well, in a perfect world, of course, we wouldn't need government, at least as we see it today, because we would be governed by the law of love. Everyone would be kind to everybody else, looking out for one another. Love would bind us together. But in a fallen world, self-interest is often the rule, and often the strong will attempt to prey upon the weak. As James Madison once famously said, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. The fact that we need government reflects the fact that we're not angels, we're sinners who need sometimes to be held in check. Where there is no law, everyone tends to do what's right in their own eyes, as the Bible says. The strong tend to prey upon the weak, and chaos can ensue. Government serves then as a kind of referee to see to it that everyone is treated fairly, no one is taken advantage of, and the strong don't devour the weak. William Barclay puts it this way: a state is essentially a body of men who have covenanted together to maintain certain relationships between each other by the observance of certain laws. Without these laws and the mutual agreement to observe them, the bad and selfish strong man would be supreme. The weak would go to the wall. Life would become ruled by the law of the jungle. Every ordinary man owes his security to the state and is therefore under a responsibility to it. Ideally, men should be bound together by Christian love, but they are not. And the cement which keeps them together is the state. The government then is part of the glue that helps keep our society together. And it's a referee that keeps us from devouring one another. The Apostle Paul basically says the same thing here in Romans 13. He gives three purposes for the state. First, the state or government is to punish evildoers who do harm to others. Verse 3a says, rulers hold a terror for those who do wrong, not for those who do right. Verse 4b says that the one in authority bears the sword to punish those who do wrong. And in verse 4c, he is God's servant, an agent of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. One clear purpose of government, then, Paul tells us, is to punish those who would try to harm others or do so. Another purpose for government is stated in verse 3b. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and he will commend you. Sometimes governments or rulers will hand out medals or commendations to soldiers or police officers or teachers or volunteer workers who have contributed in a very positive way to society. They've excelled in sacrificing for the greater public good. These governments do this not only to honor and acknowledge the good service given, but also to encourage and promote the same type of good citizenry and behavior in others. And this is a legitimate role for the government. Peter makes the same 2 points in 1 Peter, where he acknowledges the state's role in this way. He says, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every authority instituted among men, whether to the king as the supreme authority or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. Very much like Paul, then, Peter says that two main purposes of government are to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do what's right. A third and final purpose for the state, which Paul gives us, is to do us good in general. It says in verse 4 that the governing authority is God's servant to do you good. Even beyond protecting us from evildoers and making sure no one takes advantage of us, the government also provides us with good and useful services. It provides us with national security through the military, with local security through the police. It provides us with good roads to travel on and public transportation. It provides us with school for our kids, with help for the poor and needy, with water and sewage, and so on and so on. One of the purposes of government, then, is to do us good in general, provide us with public services which make life more livable. And I'll have more to say on that in a moment. Well, that's what the government is supposed to do for us. What are we in turn supposed to do for it? What are our duties toward the governing authorities? First and foremost, as Peter says, we are to be in submission to them, and Paul agrees in verse 1. Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities. Then in verse 5, therefore it is necessary to submit to the authorities. Paul makes the same point in Titus 3:1. Remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready to do whatever is good. So toward the governing authorities, we should be submissive, obedient, respectful, and helpful in general. Why should we do that? What's our motivation in doing so? Well, Paul tells us, first of all, if the authorities have been established by God and are God's servants, if we rebel against them, we'll be rebelling against what God has instituted, as Paul says in verse 2a. And by this, we'll bring judgment on ourselves, as it says in 2b. Not only will the government come down on us as a terror to those who do evil, as it says, as a force which does not bear the sword in vain, but God's anger will be against us also, and his wrath, as well as the government's wrath, will be upon us. Now, we might just pause here to note that in Romans chapter 13, Paul is addressing how government normally works. He's not addressing what happens when governments go bad, when they really go off the rails, when they're commanding us to worship the emperor or to round up certain people groups for the purpose of genocide. Paul's talking about what our proper response to government should be under most normal conditions. As William Hendrickson puts it, here Paul shows us what government should be doing. He doesn't address the issues of civil disobedience or the overthrow of a wicked realm. We'll take a look at those things next week. But here Paul is showing us what our approach should be in the normal course of events, and that's obedience and respect toward government. As Hendrickson writes, it is clear then that in writing as he does here in Romans 13:2, the apostle is thinking of the ruler who is performing his duty of preserving order, approving good behavior, and punishing evil. In that case, he who opposes the authority is indeed resisting the divine ordinance. But there's a second better reason why we should obey government beyond just fear of punishment, and that is for the sake of conscience, that we know that it will please God who has established these governments. Verse 5, therefore it is necessary to submit to the authorities not only because of possible punishment, but also because of conscience. In pleasing the authorities, we'll also be pleasing God who established them, who set them over us. A final reason we ought to submit to the authorities, as we saw in verse 4, is that they are God's servants to do us good. If God has assigned them to do us good, why would we want to get in the way of that? Why would we want to prevent that? We'll only be hurting ourselves. Our first duty toward government, then, is to be in submission to it, to obey, and to honor that. A second duty we have toward government, brace yourselves, this is going to hurt a little bit, we are to pay taxes. As we noted a moment ago, the government provides many useful and helpful services to us which make life more livable. Things such as national defense, schools, roads, water, sewage, etc. And many of these services would not be possible if it weren't for the government. Therefore, we owe them a debt. Barclay puts it this way: to the state, ordinary people owe a wide range of services which individually they could not enjoy. It would be impossible for every man to have his own water, light, sewage, transport system. These things are obtainable only when men agree to live together. It would be quite wrong for a man to enjoy everything the state provides and refuse all responsibility for it. In other words, the laborer is worthy of his labor, his wages. The laborer is worthy of his wages. Since the state provides valuable service for us, it's only right that we compensate them fairly for what they do for us. That's why Paul writes in verse 7, give everyone what you owe him. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. The governors and rulers, they work full time to provide services for us. They don't have other jobs usually, and therefore they should be paid for what they're doing. As Paul says in verse 6, this is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. These governing authorities devote themselves full time to governing, and therefore, again, they should be paid fairly for their work. Jesus said the same thing when he said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and unto God what is God. The Roman government, as you know, was far from perfect in Jesus' day, but it did keep the peace. It provided some level of safety for travel. It provided good roads for travel, aqueducts for water, etc. Therefore, Caesar should be paid for the valuable services rendered. Jesus taught we should pay taxes. Sorry about that. And Jesus paid taxes himself. You might recall how when he was going to pay the temple tax, he sent Peter, and Peter caught this fish, and there was a coin with enough in the fish's mouth with enough to pay Jesus' taxes and Peter's taxes. Apparently, the temple tax back then was about $5 or a fin apiece. Oh, sorry about that. A second duty we have toward God is to pay taxes and render unto Caesar what is his due as valuable services rendered. Yet another obligation we have the governing authorities is to show them honor and respect. Verse 7. Give everyone what you owe him. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Given that the governing authorities have been established by God and are his representatives, we owe them a level of respect and honor. Even if you don't think very highly of them as individuals or leaders, we should still show them respect due to their office and should treat them with dignity. Peter echoes this sentiment in 1 Peter 3:17. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the brotherhood of believers. Fear God. Honor the king. It's worth noting that when Peter wrote these words, he was probably referring to the Emperor Nero, who had cast him into prison and who went down in history as one of the worst kings ever. If Peter could show respect for the office of the emperor under Nero, then certainly we can show honor and respect for our governing authorities, our civil authorities, even when we disagree with them. Jesus himself showed respect for rulers in their high office, even when those rulers hardly seemed worthy of it. We don't always have to agree with our rulers, of course, and there are sometimes, in fact, when we should not. But even then, we can always disagree in a respectful and agreeable manner when we have to do it. A fourth and final obligation we have toward government, which Paul doesn't mention here, but he does in 1 Timothy, and is that we are to pray for our leaders, as theirs is not an easy task. Paul writes there, I urge then, first of all, that requests, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for everyone, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. This is good and pleases God our Savior, who wants all men to be saved and come to a knowledge of the truth. It's often been said that in a democracy, we get the government we deserve. If we don't vote or don't get informed of the issues or don't get involved in the political process, then any evil that results from our government, we have some share in it. But how much truer is this for us as Christians if we don't pray for our leaders? If we don't pray that our civil authorities would govern wisely and justly, we're neglecting an important duty, because it could really do a lot of good for God's kingdom as well as for our nation. One of the reasons the Apostle Paul was able to so effectively ministered throughout the Roman Empire was because of what Rome had done through its government, the so-called Pax Romana, or Peace of Rome. Rome had unified much of the known world in that area and had established good roads to travel on, along with safety so you could travel safely. And this brought considerable law and order and made Paul's missionary journeys much easier and much more successful. When Paul told Timothy to pray for those in authority, he really meant it, because he himself knew how crucial it could be for the furtherance of his ministry. One author put it this way: the stable government of Rome was therefore not only a condition of peaceful existence, but also was a valuable instrument for restraining unjust attacks on Paul's life. To pray for Paul's evangelistic work, to pray for his protection in carrying out that work, and to pray for the government were not different areas of intercession, but aspects of the same basic concern. You know, it's hard to do effective evangelistic work when there's rioting going on or a civil war blazing around you. Many a nation is not being reached with the gospel for that reason. There's just too much chaos because the government has disintegrated. It makes the work that much more difficult. Consequently, we should be praying for our own government and rulers and also for those of the nations as part of our missionary prayer. For God desires that all men be saved and come to a knowledge of the truth, and that happens more easily when we have a peaceful situation. Well, if governments have been established by God and are his servants to do us good, and if they're able to do good for society in general, for God's kingdom, then we conclude that while politics might be a dirty business, government work in itself is a high and noble calling, believe it or not. And all we have to do is look at the Bible, of course, see many examples where God's people served in government and did great work for the nations and for God's kingdom. We think, of course, of Joseph, who served in Egypt, became prime minister, the right man at the right place at the right time. And because he was prime minister of Egypt, he was able to save the nations from famine and also deliver the people of God. Or again, how about Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego? They were a blessing to the Babylonian Empire through their great wisdom and administrative powers. And their own prominence and willingness to take a stand for God resulted in saving God's people from persecution and extermination. Then, of course, we have Queen Esther, the right woman at the right place at the right time. She was able to intercede for the people of God and rescue them when she gained a hearing from the king. And of course, there's also Nehemiah, the cupbearer of the king of Persia. He not only served the king admirably, but used his political clout to get the walls of Jerusalem rebuilt, the nation reestablished. And then in the New Testament, we see powerful persons like Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. They were powerful members of the Sanhedrin, the ruling council of Israel. And through their courage and influence, they were able to go to Pontius Pilate and secure Jesus' dead body so that it wasn't thrown into a common grave, as was normally the case back then for someone who had been crucified. God thereby used their actions to set the stage for the resurrection, as well as to fulfill the prophecy of Isaiah 53:9. He was assigned a grave with the rich in his death. He was buried in the tomb of the rich man, Joseph of Arimathea. And finally, of course, there's the example of the Apostle Paul, whose Roman citizenship, time and again, served as his get-out-of-jail-free card and provided him with protection. You know, it's kind of like you say, don't hit a guy with glasses. Oh, don't hit a guy with Roman citizenship. We find recorded in the book of Acts that the government authorities saved Paul's life, or at least saved his limb, no less than 6 times in his travels. Paul's Roman citizenship also gave him access to kings and rulers, which he never would have had otherwise. On one occasion in Philippi, Paul even used his Roman citizenship to protect others. You might remember that in Philippi, the governing authorities had beaten and imprisoned Paul without a trial, even though he's a Roman citizen, something that you just did not do to a Roman citizen. That was unheard of, and the government did not look kindly upon it at all. When the officials learned that Paul was a Roman citizen, they had beaten him. They were very afraid, as they should have been, and they humbly asked Paul if he wouldn't mind just departing from the city quietly to prevent any more trouble. But Paul insisted that all the officials publicly walk him out of the city in the presence of everyone. Now, why did Paul do that? Was he being petty? No one treats Paul at Tarsus that way. No, Paul was sending the town officials a very clear message. You beat me, a Roman citizen, so you had better be careful how you treat this young church I just planted. Leave them alone, or else I might tell the governing authorities, and you'll have to answer for it. You'll be very sorry. So Paul used his power as a Roman citizen to protect this fledgling church there in Philippi. We see, therefore, how governments, and especially God's people in government, can be of great service to society in general and to the kingdom of God in particular. And how it's okay for us as believers to appeal to the government for justice when we need it. Consequently, if someone were to call you or someone you know into public service, into the government, they should know it's a very high and noble calling to which they've been called. Politics may be a dirty business, but public service in public office need not be, as long as we keep our commitments to Christ, stay faithful to Him. But since most of us here likely will never serve in public office, let me conclude with these thoughts. There is one more obligation we have toward government in our age. Back in New Testament times, most people, and especially the church, were politically powerless. Political power was in the hands of few who had attained that power by virtue of noble birth or wealth or violence or just dumb luck. Most people had no voice in government and had no choice but to submit to it whether they liked it or not. But we live in a republic or a representative democracy where we do have a piece of the power and a say in what happens through the ballot box. We have political power to influence government and therefore society in general. We have the power to decide whether a candidate or an official is really working for the public good or not, and to vote accordingly to keep that person or remove that person. Therefore, it's our duty as Christians to make good use of this power whenever possible. And God will hold us accountable for that responsibility, because to whom much has been given, much shall be expected. He will expect us to use that power to vote and be informed about candidates and issues so we can do it wisely. But unfortunately, many Christians don't take advantage of this civic blessing and responsibility. And that's a real shame, because if we all did, we could sway many in election. Elections often hinge on just a few points, percentage points this way or the other. So we could really make a difference if all Christians just got out and voted wisely. We could have a far greater impact on the country than we're currently having. One pastor wrote about this a number of years ago, but his point still holds true. He writes, and he's talking mainly about the presidential elections, but really refers to all. Did you know that in this presidential election, one single special interest group can determine who sits in the White House? It is simply that close. One more fact. Christians vote in the same percentages as the rest of the population. Therefore, if 20% of registered voters cast a ballot, the number of registered Christians who vote is about 20%. If that percentage were raised just 5%, Christians would determine our next president of the United States because of their sheer number of additional votes. It wouldn't be close. If the believers who didn't vote last election did vote this time, they would determine every single race in the country. What I'm saying is simple. Christians can be the special interest that makes a difference in this election if they will simply vote. If you pray to be a light in our country, here's your chance. Do what is right. Vote. One of the blessings of being an American is that we are the government to some degree, but that power is only of value if we make use of it. So we need to get informed. We need to find out who the candidates are and what they believe. We need to do that at all levels of government. Then we need to pray for wisdom and get out and vote. Let us promote good, restrain evil, and be God's faithful servants in that way. Amen.